Inflation crushed the Joe Biden presidency. It ate it alive. If Donald Trump is not careful, inflation will crush his presidency and eat it alive, because that is where Americans want him to be focused.
Clearly, Harry Enten is fired up over the topic of inflation, far more so than Donald Trump is anymore. He used to talk about it a lot. His tune has certainly changed recently, and as Harry Enten is pointing out there, that could potentially come with some political cost to it. And Enten has some numbers to back this up. Take a look.
You know, we'll talk about the focus, where Americans think Trump should be focused on. And not much of a surprise in his first 100 days, they believe, look at that, the top answer, inflation at 34%. And then number 3, it's the economy in general at 21%. Is Trump focused enough on inflation? Not enough. 66%, that is 2/3 of the country. Just a third of the country say he's focused the right amount. Get this, 48% of Republicans say he's not focused enough on the problem of inflation. Economy is excellent or good. You go back to November of 2020, right? When Donald Trump lost re-election, it was 49%. By this past election, it was 32%. Look at where we were in a recent Marquette University Law School poll. It was 27%.
Which is pretty rough when you consider that the tariffs haven't really gone into effect yet. The long-term impact on the prices of a variety of different goods and services that'll be impacted by mass deportation. We're not seeing that yet. People are already incredibly pessimistic, and that's before the seemingly inevitable damage of Trump's economic policies actually kicks in. So that said, that's some of what Harry Enten has to say. Well, what is Donald Trump saying about this topic recently? Take a look at that.
As part of the reciprocal tariffs, would you also direct agencies to study the impact they would have on prices in the US?
No, there's nothing to study. There's nothing to study. It's going to go well.
I mean, look, that's obviously a really flippant answer to give on something incredibly important that could cost millions of people jobs, their financial livelihood. But I also think that he's kind of right. Like, sure, we could get into the specifics by studying it, but to understand basically how this is gonna go, we don't have to study it. We know what effect tariffs have. We know what effect they're likely to have in this case. But I also think that when, as Harry Enten points out, it's so clear that people are worried, not just in general about inflation, but worried about what they see and what they don't see coming out of Trump on that topic. For him to brush that aside like that, like imagine if Joe Biden had done that. Like a reporter had said, hey, we're really concerned about what you're doing, what it could do to inflation. He's like, no, there's nothing to, whatever, don't care. He lost re-election. And so is it impossible that if Trump keeps this up, that the midterms can be really rough for the Republicans?
Yeah.
We'll see.
So, of course, as usual, we're going to be fair and consistent. So first of all, when Barack Obama handed Donald Trump a terrific economy back in 2017, we pointed that out. So then Trump pretended like he created that economy on day one. That didn't happen. So as you saw there, already Americans were at 32% in terms of their hopefulness about the economy when Joe Biden hands it to Donald Trump. So he starts at a low level, so that's fair. He brings it further down to 27%, that's a disaster. So to me, he went down 5%, it's in really bad shape. That's less of a problem. The bigger problem is, yes, but are you going to do anything about it? Right? So, and John's absolutely right, and that's where the consistency comes in. So if you blame Joe Biden for not doing enough, then you should be consistent and blame Donald Trump for not doing enough / nothing / being counterproductive. So I'm a little bit more mixed on tariffs than John is potentially. And I think the reciprocal tariffs make sense. Hey, you're gonna charge us 15%, we're gonna charge you 15%. That makes sense to me. I know that it has inflationary pressure. Maybe Trump is right. And remember, this used to be a progressive position, right? So the jury's out for me, not on whether it creates inflation. I think John is right there. It probably will add to inflation a little bit. And so if I was doing tariffs right now, even reciprocal tariffs, the ones that are fair, I'd be a little worried about inflation, right? And maybe in the long run, it does create more jobs, protects our industry, etc. But that's in the long run. Yes, okay, so let's put that aside for a second. That might be counterproductive. Maybe it's worth it in the long run, probably not, but maybe, okay, depending on how you do it. But yes, but what else are you doing to bring down inflation? And John's absolutely right. If Biden was like, oh, eggs are up, price of eggs are up, so what? It's your avian flu, so what, right? Oh, what are you gonna do to bring down inflation? So what, nothing, so what, right? People would go nuts, including mainstream media, and they'd tear his head off, and they did. But Trump gets a free pass. No free pass here. Brother, are you gonna do anything about inflation or not? That was your #1 promise. And that was the #1 thing that Americans cared about in this election. I don't remember in the election talking about the American people screaming out, "You've got to cut USAID." You've got, that wasn't, in fact, they pretended that they weren't going to do that. When people talked about Project 2025, oh, no, I got nothing to do with Project 2025. I'm just worried about inflation and price of gas and eggs. And then he gets into office and all of a sudden, yeah, let's do Project 2025 and who cares about inflation? So let's be consistent here, Michael.
Yeah, but it also, it's in a way, to look at this now is a very difficult thing to do because they're obfuscating so much. There's so much chaos coming out of Washington right now that the notion that these poll numbers and that people are going to glom onto these right this second and that's going to make a difference, to me seems foolish. It's encouraging, if you don't like Donald Trump, to see these inflation numbers going the way they are, to prove that what he's doing on tariffs and what he's not doing on examining what other steps can be taken to reverse inflation, that isn't being done is, for people who are opponents of his, is a great thing. But what I mean is that there's so much chaos right now through the clearing. If these numbers make it through that clearing later on, it's going to be super important. And yes, you're talking about what we do here and have done here for 20 some odd years, and we can debate how long it's been. But the fact that there aren't other places. So the Biden example to me is true. It's right, but the reason that if it were Biden doing it, if Biden had George Soros in his office the way that Trump had Elon in his office, obviously people would have gone bananas. It's because they have this infrastructure of media on lower levels that goes throughout this country that is supportive of anything he does blindly. And I met those people on the road for this show, but I met them, and you've met them at conventions and in other places. They don't care. They as long as Donald Trump said it, because the places they're getting their information are saying it's fine, as opposed to, and they're also upset. They would be upset about George Soros, so they would mimic that all the way home. I think that's really what is at the crux of this, right?
Yeah, but let me disagree with you in a couple of ways. So
please,
that'll be new. Yeah. By the way, longest running show in internet history. And that is not in dispute. So that
is not in dispute.
Okay.
Longest running disagreements.
That's true.
We've been disagreeing longer than
for decades. We've been disagreeing.
Burr and Hamilton.
So I hear you on. Look, we got poll numbers here like a couple of weeks into his administration. That's not the relevant part. I hear you on that, right? But the relevant part of the poll isn't Trump's going down, or Democrats are going to win midterms 2 years from now. No. Don't misunderstand this. The relevant part is that the people who voted for Trump aren't just MAGA. There are tons of independents and moderates voted for Trump. That's why he won. That's why he won every single state. That's why he won the popular vote. So when you look at a poll like this and they're instantly dissatisfied.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a warning sign, an important warning sign.
That's not disagreeing with me. I agree that. I just think we can't, there's nothing to grab onto yet until this all settles a little bit, and it will. This has just been a chaotic 3, 4, 5 weeks. And so it's not making the impact of people calling their senators and say, don't support this guy, don't support Kash Patel in the confirmation here. I mean, there's no real effect to that, but they do matter, and they will matter even more. I'm not discounting that. I'm just saying that, they're not making it into the clearing just yet.
I'm going to say something small, even though it's a gigantic topic. The part we probably do disagree on is their media is now not uniform at all. So on inflation, they're probably uniform. I haven't seen anybody break on inflation. And to your point, it's probably too early for them to break on inflation, right? Not enough has happened. But a bunch of them are disagreeing with each other all over the place.
For sure, and I don't disagree with that, but they have an effective echo chamber. I don't think that can be denied.
It's still there.
If you go below the surface, sure, there are fissures and there are breaks. But I think in general, and we've had this conversation before. I mean, the fact that Rush Limbaugh called his people ditto heads, and they loved that, as opposed to if you called Democrats ditto heads. Well, what did I do wrong? Why am I?
It's a much larger conversation because now I feel like it's kind of flipped. But anyway, that opens up a can.
Well, it may have, but it is that way, and it has been that way, and it's established that way, and I think that's the thing. And also the question. Sorry, he asked that question that was asked of the president just now. they would turn around, they say, Dems study, we don't study stuff. Elitists study, liberals study.
Well, you don't want to study before election.
Well, yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, but he didn't.
Yeah.
So.
I agree. I think that the media is gonna help carry him through with like his core 27 to 31% or whatever, which probably makes up the vast majority of Harry Hinton's numbers of people who think he is doing enough on inflation right now.
Right.
And that's where a lot of people get a lot of their information. But everybody gets some of their information from places that Fox News can't control, like the grocery store. And when you go to buy a car, and when you're paying your rent, and when you're purchasing things online, it doesn't matter what Fox says about that. If the price is higher, the price is higher. And people are gonna see that. That's an objective thing that every conservative person is gonna see day after day after day. And they might be resistant to place blame, but the economic frustration, I think, will definitely be there. And really fast, you mentioned that we maybe disagree on tariffs, and maybe we do to some extent. It might seem more so based on what I said in the earlier part. I make the case for tariffs on TDR constantly, and he could have. There's all sorts of things you could say about the medium or long-term effects of tariffs that would be a little bit more politically difficult, but would have the virtue of being honest about the long-term plan and the suffering that we need to pass through to get there, but he's not doing that. He's not doing that, despite, and I keep being told that he's super powerful and he has a stranglehold on our culture. He's not doing that work, and I think that's to his peril. Because if he was at least upfront, then when people experience a little bit of pain, it can fit into a meta narrative of what MAGA is or whatever. But he's telling them now, there's not gonna be any pain, but there is gonna be pain. And that I think is gonna cause some whiplash, even among his voters. I think that this is both a weak way to approach his long-term policy on tariffs and dishonest, and also potentially catastrophic politically when we look at what happened to Biden. And really fast, I would also say, Biden, I think, rightly got a lot of blame for inflation being high and prices being high. And we can sort of say, well, Trump might have the same sort of thing, but also bear in mind, what would be causing the inflation, these two things. Trump is basically unilaterally choosing to start a worldwide trade war. Joe Biden was trying, and maybe we disagree with some of his techniques, to take us out of a recession. Sort of necessarily, and people also forget that a lot of that spending that led to that inflation was approved under Donald Trump before Joe Biden even got in. So the attempt to save us leading to inflation seems like maybe it'll be judged in hindsight a little bit less harshly than a dude who just wanted to mix it up with France or whatever.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, yeah.
Yeah, so look, I think that the most underlying problem here is that he doesn't actually have a plan for reducing inflation.
Yeah.
So the tariffs don't reduce inflation. That's not it might be good in other ways, but that's not an anti-inflationary thing at all, right? Nobody thinks it is. And then he's pressuring the Federal Reserve to lower interest rates. That's to have a faster growing economy, but that also is inflationary, not anti-inflationary. They raised the rates to make sure that inflation didn't get out of control. So why does he not have a plan for inflation? Because he doesn't care.
Yeah.
He cares about making sure that they get the tax cuts for himself and the donors and all that. They're doing all this cutting. Why? Because they care about balanced budgets? No, he added $8.4 trillion to the debt last time. They're doing all the cutting so they can, when they get to the corporate tax cuts, they can say, oh, we already cut so much. That's why we can do afford these corporate tax cuts. So you're not gonna save a dime from any of this cost cutting. And I need you to understand that. And he's not ever, so it always comes back to this same two fundamental questions. How much is he going to sink in the polling when Michael's right, this is just the beginning, but now instead of being 4 weeks in, we're 4 months in, or we're 8 months in, and inflation is still there, or worse, because he hasn't done anything about it. At that point, how much of his base, how much of his moderate voters rebel against him? How low does his numbers go? And does he definitely cares, but what will he do to react? Will he go, okay, I'm changing directions, which Trump does a lot, right? Or will he keep digging? And then if he keeps digging, that's the real problem. Not for the Democrats, and they'll have an easier time winning the midterms, but for the country, if he digs in and stops listening to the courts and starts going to his worst instincts, that's when we're in trouble.
Also, Harry Hinton is a Bills fan, so he's a big Bills fan. You have to grade his optimism on a curve.
They had a good final game. I actually watched that one. Yeah, it's entirely possible. And to the point of whether he cares or not, like I know that he loves to joke like, I'm gonna run for the next 20 terms or whatever. I don't know that he necessarily lasts another 4 years in general, let alone politically. He's governing like a person that just doesn't really care what record and legacy he leaves for the next Republican that runs for office?
He doesn't.
Does he care if JD Vance is the economy's in ruins around him?
He wouldn't even endorse him the other day. He didn't even say.
It was funny. I enjoyed that as a bit of trolling. But
my favorite joke was you even suggesting that Donald Trump might care about another human being.
I know. It's crazy. Maybe if it's Ivanka running, but anyway,
maybe not.
Maybe he's a true believer. Maybe he thinks that if we just cut corporate taxes down to negative 60% and we remove every single regulation, then that actually will spur so much activity. Maybe he thinks that.
He doesn't think anything.
He doesn't think.
Yeah, he doesn't know about those economic theories, nor does he care about them. He's just like, he asked somebody, how much is it going to lower my taxes?
Yeah.
Good, we're doing it.
But so the final point that I want to make, though, and this is, it's like pessimistic and optimistic at the exact same time, is the last 3 elections, people were really frustrated and they threw the incumbent out and went in a wildly different direction. And then they went back in a wildly different direction. And then they went back in the other way in a wildly different direction. And if he's just going to cause more pain, more suffering, more chaos, we remember how sick of people got of that in the first term. His approval ratings tanked in the first 6 months when he was president. And he wasn't nearly as aggressive or offensive or chaotic as he is being right now. And so it looks like he's teeing up potentially for a big lurch back to the other side again. And the thing for me, and I think for a lot of our audience, that I think is the big question in the next few years is, does that mean we now finally have the window for an actual progressive who will not just turn the wheel in a different direction, but break the wheel a la Daenerys Targaryen? Or is that gonna once again result in a population that's like, it's just so chaotic, everything is so terrible, just give me whatever stable centrist Democratic governor you've got, and it's gonna look a hell of a lot better than Mr. Horse in the hospital.
Yeah, look, I know what the Democratic leadership is going to want to do, and Democratic consultants, et cetera. They're going to want to go with the wheel. America loves the wheel, when in reality, America hates the wheel. So the only way to lose to Trump or next time around JD Vance or in the midterms is to just keep going back and going, no. Yeah, establishment Democrats are great. The status quo is wonderful. So, but I think they have enough sense to pretend to be populist, and that's the real problem, because people might believe them.
Well, what they have to learn from Trump too is the cult of personality works in America today. So it's not just progressive or moderate or corporate, it's gotta be the person. And the person has to captivate enough people, maybe not in the same way that this guy does, but in a different way, enough people to actually bring voters out to vote. And
so that's the problem. Look, they'll think that Buttigieg is captivating because he is to them.
But he wasn't last time.
But they think oh my God, he's so Harvard educated, he's captivating. But that's not captivating to America.
No, that's not captivating to America. Right. But it's not just Pete Buttigieg. There has to be somebody who kind of breaks a mold, who has.
But that's the thing, Michael. I mean, now we're going too far.
That doesn't happen. I mean, those are
in the Democratic Party. The minute you have someone who breaks a mold, and of course, John's joking around about Bernie, right?
No.
The Democratic Party.
I don't mean.
Oh, really? Okay, but the Democratic Party.
I didn't mean it in that way. I didn't mean that was the wrong phraseology.
Because the Democratic Party hates people who break the mold.
No. But what I'm saying, I'm talking about the personality mold. I'm talking about that people like Bill Clinton, who come along once in a political generation, Barack Obama to an extent, Ronald Reagan to an extent. That we are in a time where charisma is going to matter, and it's not just that you went to Harvard and you're smart and you can argue on Fox News and you did a good job at transportation and as the mayor of a town in Indiana. I haven't formulated this completely, but I do know that there has to be something that the Democrats are going to have to learn is that people want to be captivated by the person. Yeah. People were captivated by Bernie Sanders, and that's not. There isn't any captivating personality right now on either side, really. It's why Tucker Carlson scares me. But there's time to make somebody captivating too. That's just my take too. I mean, there's no
I'll just say, we got to go. Yeah. But super last thing. Look, this is the terrible example because it was so microscopic, no one really noticed. But when I ran it for Congress in 2020, it's hard to argue I'm not captivating. You could have a lot of opinions about me that are negative, right? But certainly I'm a character, right? And the Democratic Party in unison despised it. They hate captivating. And they went with Christy Smith, who was the single most boring person in America. Nina Turner, captivating. They hate it. They hate it.
Captivating has to come with other parts, and it is a longer conversation. But Barack Obama was captivating, and they set aside Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton for Barack Obama. There is a level of captivation that is almost intangible, and it has nothing to do with the fact that you're captivating. You were also running in a district. I mean, again, too long conversation for now. But I don't think it's the perfect analog to what I'm talking about. And
yeah,
I need to formulate what I mean a little. I think you get it. But
I get it, but
got time.
Yeah,
I haven't.
Well, the Democrats don't have a lot of time. They got to get somebody who's an actual populist who fights for people. That fight, and it can't be genteel like Obama, where he's an enormous.
I'm talking on the campaign trail. You're right. Too genteel, but he got too scared of being what he wanted to be. But I do think that there has to be on the way there. That there has to be something more than that.
More than that.
Maybe ideally someone young, good on social media, telegenic. If only.
Thanks for watching the Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.